The Ostrogoths were a branch of the later Goths. The Ostrogoths, under Theodoric the Great, established a kingdom in Italy in the late 5th and 6th centuries. The Ostrogoths traced their origins to the Greuthungian, a semi-legendary kingdom north of the Black Sea in the 3rd and 4th centuries. Migrating southward from the Baltic Sea, the Ostrogoths, at the time known as the Greuthungi, built up a huge empire stretching from the Dniester to the Volga River, and from the Black Sea to the Baltic shores. The Ostrogoths were probably literate in the 3rd century, and the trade with the Romans was highly developed. Their Danubian kingdom reached its zenith under King Ermanaric, who is said to have committed suicide at an old age, where the Huns attacked his people and subjugated them in about 370. After their subjugation by the Huns, little is heard of the Ostrogoths for about 80 years, after which they reappear in Pannonia on the middle Danube River as federates of the Romans. However, a pocket remained behind in the Crimea when the bulk of them moved to Central Europe, and these Crimean Ostrogoths existed until at least the 16th century. After the collapse of the Hun Empire after the Battle of Nidau, the Ostrogoths under Theodoric the Great first moved to Moesia and later conquered the Italian kingdom of the German warrior Odoacer. Theodoric became king of the Ostrogothic kingdom in 493 and died in 526. A period of instability then ensued, tempting the Eastern Roman Emperor Justinian to declare war on the Ostrogoths in 535 in an effort to restore the former western provinces of the Roman Empire. Initially, the Byzantines were successful, but under the leadership of Totila, the Goths reconquered most of the lost territory until Totila's death at the Battle of Taginair. The war lasted for almost 20 years and caused enormous damage in depopulation of Italy. The remaining Ostrogoths were absorbed into the Lombards, who established a kingdom in Italy in 568. Divided Goths. Greuthungian Ostrogothi. A division of the Goths is first attested in 291. The Tervingi are first attested around that date. The Greuthungi, Vesa, and Ostrogothi are all attested no earlier than 388. The Greuthungi are first named by Amminus Marcellinus, writing no earlier than 392 and perhaps later than 395, and basing his account on the words of a Tervingian chieftain who is attested as early as 376. The Ostrogoths are first named in a document dated September 392 from Milan. Claudian mentions that they together with the Greuthungi inhabit Phrygia. According to Herwig Wolfram, the primary sources either use the terminology of Tervingi, Greuthungi or Vesa, Ostrogothi, and never mix the pairs. All four names were used together, but the pairing was always preserved, as in Greuthungi, Ostrogothi, Tervingi, Vesa. That the Tervingi were the Vesa, Visigothi, and the Greuthungi the Ostrogothi is also supported by Jordanus. He identified the Visigothic kings from Alaric I to Alaric II as the heirs of the 4th century Tervingian king Athanaric, and the Ostrogothic kings from Theodoric the Great to Theodahad as the heirs of the Greuthungian king Ermanaric. This interpretation, however, though very common among scholars today, is not universal. According to the Jordanes Getica, around 400 the Ostrogoths were ruled by Ostrogotha and derived their name from this father of the Ostrogoths. But modern historians often assume the converse, that Ostrogotha was named after the people. Both Herwig Wolfram and Thomas Burns conclude that the terms Tervingi and Greuthungi were geographical identifiers used by each tribe to describe the other. This terminology therefore dropped out of use after the Goths were displaced by the Hunnic invasions. In support of this, Wolfram cites Zosimus as referring to a group of Scythians north of the Danube who were called Greuthungi by the barbarians north of the Ister. Wolfram concludes that this people was the Tervingi who had remained behind after the Hunnic conquest. He further believes that the terms Vesa and Ostrogothi were used by the peoples to boastfully describe themselves. On this understanding, the Gruthungi and Ostrogothi were more or less the same people. The nomenclature of Gruthungi and Turvingi fell out of use shortly after 400. In general, the terminology of a divided Gothic people disappeared gradually after they entered the Roman Empire. The term Visigoth, however, was an invention of the 6th century. Cassiodorus, a Roman in the service of Theodoric the Great, invented the term Visigothi to match Ostrogothi, which terms he thought of as a Western Goths and Eastern Goths, respectively. The Western-Eastern division was a simplification and a literary device of 6th century historians where political realities were more complex. Furthermore, Cassiodorus used the term Goths to refer only to the Ostrogoths, whom he served, and reserved the geographical term Visigoths for the Gallo-Hispanic Goths. Other names for the Goths abounded. A Germanic, Byzantine or Italian author referred to one of the two peoples as the Valagothi, meaning Roman Walla Goths. In 484 the Ostrogoths had been called the Valamera at sea because they followed Theodoric, a descendant of Valamir. This terminology survived in the Byzantine East as late as the reign of Athalaric, who was called Tau Omicron Upsilon Alpha Lambda Epsilon Mu Epsilon Rho Iota Alpha Kappa Omicron Upsilon by John Malalas. Etymology: Gruthungi may mean steppe dwellers or people of the pebbly coasts. The root groit is probably related to the Old English griot, meaning flat. This is supported by evidence that geographic descriptors were commonly used to distinguish people living north of the Black Sea both before and after Gothic settlement there, and by the lack of evidence for an earlier date for the name pair Turvingi Gruthungi than the late 3rd century. However, that the name of Gruthungi has pre-Pontic, possibly Scandinavian, origins has support. It may mean rock people, to distinguish the Ostrogoths from the Geats from Götaland in southern Sweden. The Roman historian Jordanes refers to an Evagriatingian Skansa as part of his description of Gothiskansa. It has also been suggested that Gruthungi may be related to certain place names in Poland, but this has met with little support. Ostrogothi means Goths of the rising sun. This has been interpreted as gleaming Goths or East Goths. By the 4th century the Ostrogoths had developed a distinct language known as Gothic, classified by linguists as an East Germanic language. Gothic eventually died out sometime in the Middle Ages as the Visigoths and Ostrogoths were absorbed by other European peoples. Language: while none of the Eastern Germanic languages are still spoken, Gothic is the only one with continuous texts remaining. Singularly the most important work amid the surviving Gothic texts is the translation of the Bible by the Visigothic bishop Ulfilas, comprising the earliest remnants of the Germanic languages known. Smatterings of the Gothic language can be found in Italian, but its presence is minimal. Gothic was still spoken sporadically in Crimea as late as the 16th and 17th centuries. Much of the disappearance of the Gothic language is attributable to the Goths' cultural and linguistic absorption by other European peoples during the Middle Ages.